Hotels are strange places. Every night, thousands of strangers sleep in the exact same bed a stranger slept in the night before, under the same ceiling, breathing the same recycled air, trusting a lock they didn't install and a door they can't see through. We tell ourselves it's just a room. 4 walls, a mattress, a mini fridge that hums too loud at 2 a.m. But rooms remember, staff remember, and sometimes the thing that checked into a room never really checked out. I want to start with something that happened to a woman named Dana Whitfield, a 34-year-old sales rep from Ohio who spent about a third of her life in mid-tier business hotels, the kind with a Keurig machine bolted to the desk and motivational art bolted to the wall. She knew hotel rooms the way most people know their childhood bedroom, which is exactly why what happened in room 214 of a hotel outside Charlotte, North Carolina, unsettled her so badly. It was a Tuesday night in October. Dana had flown in for a conference, checked in around 8 p.m., ordered room service, and settled into bed to catch up on emails. Nothing unusual, until she heard the clicking. It was faint, rhythmic, coming from the direction of the air vent above the bathroom door, a rectangular metal grate about the size of a hardcover book. Click, pause, click, click, pause. She assumed it was the HVAC system cycling on and off, the way old hotel units do. She put in earbuds and tried to sleep. At 1:47 a.m., she woke up because the clicking had changed rhythm. It wasn't mechanical anymore. It was deliberate. 3 clicks, a long pause, 3 clicks again, like something testing a mechanism or someone adjusting a lens. Dana sat up in the dark and stared at the vent. She told herself it was nothing. Hotels are full of noises. Pipes groan, ducts contract, ice machines down the hall bang like someone's trying to break out of them. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the sound was coming from directly behind the grate, not from somewhere far off in the building's guts. She got up, turned on the bathroom light, and looked at the vent straight on for the first time. And that's when she noticed something odd. A thin strip of black tape along one edge of the grate, almost invisible against the dark metal, holding it slightly ajar from the wall. Vents aren't taped. Vents are screwed in. Her stomach dropped, but she told herself there was probably a boring explanation. Maintenance work, an insulation fix, anything. She almost went back to bed. Almost. But something made her grab her phone and turn on the flashlight, and she pointed it up into the gap behind the tape. For a half-second, she swore she saw a small circular glint. Glass, round, about the size of a shirt button. Then it was gone. Not physically gone, just gone from the angle, like something inside had moved. Dana didn't sleep after that. She sat fully dressed in the corner of the room farthest from the vent, phone in hand, recording video of the grate for over an hour, telling herself she was being paranoid and unable to convince herself of it even once. At 6 a.m., the moment the front desk opened, she was downstairs. The night clerk, a college kid who looked like he hadn't wanted this job even before 6 a.m., listened to her story with visible discomfort. He said maintenance had done some duct work a few weeks back, but he wasn't sure what room. Dana asked to be moved. He complied immediately. Too immediately, in a way that told her this wasn't the first time someone had asked. She insisted the old room be inspected. To the hotel's credit, they called their maintenance supervisor that same morning. What they found, according to the incident report Dana later obtained through a lawyer, because she did pursue this, was a battery-powered pinhole camera taped to the inside of the ductwork, angled down through the grate toward the bed. It had a micro SD card. It was full. The hotel's internal investigation, and later a police report, found that the camera hadn't been placed by hotel staff, but by a former maintenance contractor who still had swipe access to service areas months after his contract ended. He'd apparently installed similar devices in at least 2 other rooms in the same wing, rotating them room to room during routine maintenance. Police recovered footage spanning several months. Dana was told, as gently as investigators could manage, that hers was not the only card, and hers was not the only room.
She never found out how many people were on those cards. Investigators wouldn't tell guests specifics for obvious reasons, and the case moved slowly through a legal system that treats hidden camera cases with frustrating inconsistency depending on the state. What she does know is that for months afterward, she couldn't sleep in a hotel room without first standing on the bed and shining her phone flashlight into every vent, every smoke detector, every strange gap in the wall trim. She started doing something else, too, something she now tells other frequent travelers to do. She began photographing every air vent, smoke detector, and outlet in a room before unpacking. Not because a photo stops a camera, but because a straight-on photo, taken with flash, makes reflective lenses catch the light and glint back. The same glint she caught by accident that night in Charlotte. It became her ritual. Photo of the vent, photo of the detector, photo of the outlet strip near the desk, the one hotels love to hide a spare charging camera inside. What makes Dana's story land the way it does isn't just the camera. It's the sound. She said in interviews that to this day, the sound that stays with her isn't a scream or a bang. It's that soft, patient click, click, click from behind a vent in a dark room while she was sleeping and had no idea anything was listening back. Hidden camera cases in hotels and short-term rentals are, unfortunately, far more common than most travelers assume. Devices have been found inside smoke detectors, alarm clocks, wall outlets, decorative screws, and yes, vents. The FTC and various consumer protection groups have published guides specifically because the problem has grown alongside cheap miniature cameras. The uncomfortable truth is this: the room you sleep in tonight has almost certainly been slept in by dozens of strangers before you. And unless you check, you have no way of knowing whether one of them left something behind that's still watching. Before you fall asleep in a hotel room again, check the vents. This next one comes from a man named Marcus Illich, who worked for years as a long-haul rideshare and delivery driver, which meant motel stopovers were just part of the job. Cheap, forgettable, interchangeable rooms along interstate corridors. He'd stayed in hundreds of them. This story is about one specific night at a 2-story motel off a highway exit in rural Missouri, in a room he still refers to only as the corner room, because he refuses to say the number out loud, even now. He'd checked in late, around 11 p.m., exhausted after a 14-hour driving day. The clerk, an older woman with the flat, tired courtesy of someone who's worked graveyard shifts for decades, handed him a key card and said something odd as he walked away. "Chains on the door for a reason tonight. Use it." He assumed she meant general safety advice. He didn't think much of it. He should have. He fell asleep almost instantly. He woke up at what he estimates was around 2:30 a.m. to the sound of the door handle turning. Not a knock, not a keycard beep, just the handle, slowly rotating, catching against the deadbolt he'd thankfully thrown before bed. It stopped. Then it turned again, this time faster, more insistent, like someone testing whether the first attempt had been a fluke. Marcus sat, frozen in bed, heart slamming, listening. Whoever was outside didn't knock, didn't call out a room number to check if they had the wrong door, which is the normal, embarrassed thing a confused guest does. Instead, there was a long pause,
maybe 20 seconds, and then he heard something being slid under the door, a shape, a shadow crossing the thin strip of light at the base of the frame. He didn't move for what felt like 10 minutes. When he finally worked up the nerve to look, there was a piece of paper on the floor just inside the door. On it, in shaky handwriting, was a single word: wrong. Nothing else.
No name, no room number, no explanation. He called the front desk immediately. The same tired clerk answered, and this time her voice had lost its flatness. It had an edge of something like resignation. She told him to keep the chain on, not open the door for anyone, and that she'd deal with it. When he pressed her, dealt with what? She said only that he does this sometimes, and that security would do a walkthrough. Marcus didn't sleep again that night. Around 4 a.m., he heard footsteps pass his door, slowly, pause directly outside for several seconds, and continue on. He never saw who it was. In the morning, shaken and running on adrenaline instead of sleep, he checked out early. While repacking his duffel bag, he noticed it felt heavier than it should. Inside, tucked beneath his own clothes, was a folded flannel shirt that wasn't his. Worn, faded, smelling faintly of cigarette smoke, and a small spiral notebook filled with handwriting.
Pages and pages of it, the same looping, agitated script as the note slid under his door. He didn't read much of it. What he did read was enough. Entries about a room, about the ones who don't belong there, about putting things right. Dates going back over a year, always referencing the same handful of room numbers at the same motel. He brought the bag straight to the front desk. The clerk went pale when she saw the notebook. She told him, carefully, that there was a man, an unhoused former long-term guest from years back, who'd been evicted from the motel after a dispute over an extended stay he could no longer pay for, who still returned periodically. He believed, she said, that certain rooms were still his. He'd been banned, trespassed, even arrested once, but he kept coming back, and management had learned it was easier to quietly manage him than to permanently solve the problem in a rural area with limited police resources and no interest in escalating things. What disturbed Marcus most wasn't the man himself. It was the notebook, because tucked between the rambling entries were oddly specific details. Descriptions of guests, a red duffel bag, a trucker's jacket, a woman's laugh through the wall. Small, mundane observations about total strangers collected obsessively over more than a year, as if he'd been quietly cataloging everyone who'd ever slept in what he considered his room. Marcus's belongings had somehow ended up in the bag, not because the man broke in, the deadbolt and chain had held, but because at some point during the night, in the brief window when Marcus had stepped out to grab something from his car around 1 a.m., the door had been left unlatched for less than 2 minutes. That was enough. In that window, it seems the man slipped in, left the notebook and flannel behind, whether by mistake or as some kind of ritual, and left before Marcus returned. The motel eventually pursued a formal no trespass order with actual teeth, aided by the notebook Marcus turned over as evidence. Marcus never learned the man's full name or what happened to him afterward. What stayed with him wasn't the door handle or even the note. It was the notebook, proof that someone had been quietly watching, cataloging, and inserting himself into strangers' rooms for over a year, and that the flimsy 2 minutes when Marcus's door sat unlatched was apparently all the opportunity that was ever needed. He has a rule now, one he says he'll never break again. The chain goes on the second the door closes, and it doesn't come off. Not for a forgotten item in the car, not for anything, until morning.
The final story is less about a single guest and more about a room. Room 313 on the third floor of a mid-century motor lodge just outside a small town in the Pacific Northwest. The kind of motel built in the 1960s for road trippers, with an exterior corridor, a flickering neon sign, and a reputation among locals that outlasted several changes of ownership. The story doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to at least four, spread out over roughly 6 years, according to guest reviews, local message boards, and one investigative blog post that first stitched the pattern together. Each of them stayed in room 313 at different times, never knew each other, and each reported nearly the same thing. A phone call at 3:33 a.m., where the only sound on the other end was breathing. The first known account comes from a woman named Priya Anand, who stayed there in 2019 while driving cross-country. She woke to the room phone ringing. Not her cell, the landline handset on the nightstand, the kind almost nobody uses anymore. She checked the clock out of instinct. 3:33 a.m. She answered, said hello twice, and heard nothing but slow, steady breathing on the other end. Not static, not a bad connection. Breathing, close to the receiver, like someone standing right next to a mouthpiece. She hung up, assumed a wrong number or a prank, and thought little of it until she mentioned it to the front desk the next morning, half joking. The clerk's smile faded, and he said quietly, "That phone's not hooked up to anything. It's decorative. We disconnected the internal lines 2 renovations ago." Priya insists to this day that the phone rang, that she heard it, that she picked it up and heard breathing. And according to the front desk, it was structurally impossible for that phone to ring at all.
The second account, 2 years later, comes from a college student named Ben Castellano, who found room 313 through a budget travel site with no idea of its history. His story is nearly identical. Woken by ringing at 3:33 a.m., breathing on the line, no words. Except Ben, being younger and more stubborn, didn't hang up right away. He said, "Who is this?" 3 times. On the third time, right before the call cut off, he says the breathing changed, became faster, shallower, almost panicked, and just before the line went dead, he heard what he describes as a single, faint whisper. He's never been willing to repeat what he thinks the word was. He says it might have just been static, shaped like a word by his own frightened brain. He also says he doesn't believe that, not really. The third account is secondhand, but well documented. A maintenance worker who, during a 2022 renovation, was asked to finally remove the old, non-functional landline system from room 313 for good. Replace the phones with decorative props with no wiring at all. Cut every cable at the source. He did the work himself. He has said, on record in a local news piece about the motel's renovation, that he tested the line before cutting it to make sure it was truly dead, and got a dial tone. On a line the front office swears was disconnected 2 renovations prior. He cut it anyway. The calls, according to later guests, kept happening. The fourth account is the one that ties it together, and the one the local blog spent the most time on. A woman named Renata Kluge, staying in room 313 in 2023 for a work trip, got the same call. 3:33 a.m., breathing, no words. But Renata did something none of the others had done. She recorded it. Her phone's voice memo app happened to be open from a work call earlier, and out of sheer reflex, panic, and curiosity, she hit record and held her cell phone up to the room phone's earpiece for the final 15 seconds of the call before it disconnected. The recording is genuinely unsettling and still circulates in a few corners of the internet, though its authenticity has never been independently verified by any credible outlet, which is worth being honest about.
What you hear is breathing, uneven and labored, and then, right at the very end, 3 faint taps, evenly spaced, like knuckles against wood or plastic. Then silence, then the dial tone. What makes room 313 different from a simple ghost story is the pattern. 4 unconnected strangers, years apart, with no shared information between them, reporting an identical time, 3:33 a.m., an identical detail, breathing, not words, and, in 2 cases, a phone that staff insist has been physically incapable of ringing for years. Local legend, for what it's worth, traces the number back to an incident from the early 1980s. A long-term resident of the motel, a quiet man who kept to himself for months, was found unresponsive in that room by a housekeeper.
The reported time of the 911 call, according to an old local newspaper clipping that's been passed around message boards for over a decade, was 3:31 a.m., meaning if the timeline is accurate, he may have died in the 2 or 3 minutes just before that call, right around 3:33. Nobody can verify the exact minute, and it's entirely possible the 3:33 detail has simply become the story's own myth, reshaping itself slightly with each retelling, the way legends do. But guest after guest, arriving with no knowledge of any of this, has reported the same ringing phone at the same impossible hour, with the same sound of someone breathing on a line that, according to the people who run the building, doesn't exist anymore. The motel still operates today. Room 313 still gets booked, mostly by people who don't know its history or who book it specifically because they do. If you ever find yourself there, and the old decorative phone on the nightstand happens to ring at 3:33 in the morning, the recommendation from everyone who's lived to tell the story is simple. Don't answer it.